So thank you very, very much for being here. My name is Kim Porter. I'm the executive director of Be a Part of the Conversation. We're very grateful to have an ongoing relationship with the school district of Springfield Township, and really glad that Dr. Michelle Lutz is here. Dr. Lutz, would you like to say a few words?
Sure, thank you. Good evening, Springfield families and community members. My name is Michelle Lutz. I'm the proud director of support services here at the School District of Springfield Township. Part of my role is I get to work directly with the amazing school counselors and social workers who help support your children each and every day. Tonight, we're pleased to partner with Be Part of the Conversation for this parent program, Alcohol and Kids Under 18, a Rite of Passage. Every 2 years, our students in 6th, 8th, 10th, and 12th grade take the Pennsylvania Youth Survey. This anonymous survey provides districts like us with invaluable data and helps us tell what kids are doing in school and in the community. One of the most troubling statistics from the last administration of the survey in 2021 was that 27% of our surveyed students had consumed alcohol in their lifetime. In fact, 15% of sixth grade students admitted to drinking alcohol. And even more surprising was the fact that 32% of Springfield students who used alcohol said that they got it from their parents. So needless to say, we feel that this is an important presentation and conversation for all of our families. As you heard Kim Porter say, Be Part of the Conversation has been a longtime partner of both the School District of Springfield Township and also the Montgomery County Office for Drug and Alcohol Prevention. Their information and engaging sessions provide parents and community members with tons of information. So without further ado, I'm pleased to turn this over to Kim Porter, who's the Executive Director of Be Part of the Conversation, to introduce tonight's session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lutz. All right, so I'm going to start sharing my screen again. Okay, so thank you very much for the introduction and for everyone who's joining us tonight. Thanks to Zoom, we have a lot of recorded programs on our YouTube channel. We also have a lot of other programs coming up that you can find on our calendar. And we have support group meetings for anybody who is a parent, guardian, or grandparent who has a child of any age who might be struggling with substance use. And so here's a calendar on this part of our website for parent partnership meetings. We now have 21 meetings every week, Sunday through Thursday. All of the purple buttons meet in person. All the green buttons are meetings on Zoom. And you would just click on any one of these and get the details about the meeting, whether it's a location like this one or a Zoom meeting, you would get the link. And we also have something called the Family Recovery Course. This is again for parents who have identified that their son or daughter, again, of any age, is struggling with substance use disorder. This is totally free to attend. It's a 3-part course. It's peer-led. The outcomes have been amazing. People are finding it incredibly helpful. So if you feel this could be beneficial, I encourage you to check out this link, which I'll also share again. So you're going to hear from a couple of other folks in addition to me, thank goodness. We're going to have Kara Schwartz with us tonight. She's a terrific therapist from Miramont Treatment Center. She works with adolescents in an outpatient setting. And we also are going to hear from Lewis, who is going to share his personal story of his alcohol use disorder and his subsequent recovery. So we're so grateful to both of them for being here. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and get us just started with a little bit of background about alcohol. Alcohol is a psychoactive substance. I know that people say alcohol or drugs. Alcohol actually is a drug. We have a lot of information on that alcohol page that can give you a much deeper dive into what alcohol, the effects of alcohol in the body, but I just want to let you know about a few things. It definitely is a depressant and it can make us feel very lighthearted and effervescent. But then that's also because we're like kind of getting this dopamine hit from it because of the psychoactive properties. So we feel better, but it actually is a depressant. And so pervasive use can really become problematic in some of the things that you see listed here. There are some other effects besides that mood effect. Of course, a lot of us are familiar with the impact on the liver. You know, we think about cirrhosis and hepatitis and things like that. But also It impacts the brain. There are a lot of imaging studies that are looking at the effect of chronic or regular alcohol use on the brain. Also the heart, some impact to the heart, to the pancreas. We've had a presenter in the past, kind of in Lewis's role this evening, who she had severe pancreatitis due to her alcohol use disorder, and probably was not going to be able to maintain her life, her any kind of health if she didn't stop. So she was really kind of had hit her bottom in that way. Cancer, it does put us at greater risk for certain cancers, including those that you see listed here: head and neck, esophageal, liver, breast, and colorectal. Actually, in fact, a New Zealand study found strong evidence that alcohol can cause several types of cancer, those that you see listed here. And again, could impact the pancreas, prostate, and skin cancer as well. And I think we've all been thinking a lot more about our immune system these past 3.5 years with COVID and other things like that around. We know that alcohol does depress our immune system. And so that's something to be wary of as well. And there are many other ways that it can affect us. So lots of reasons to kind of be cautious about consumption. And again, we're especially going to talk about tonight is starting at an early age. So we know that while we have some damage to these organs, we can heal. We can absolutely repair a lot of what's been done. And the advantages are many. Well, you can see here listed all of the things that might happen once we stop consuming alcohol, or at least reducing if we feel that we may want to do that. So I'm going to now turn it over to Kara. And Kara, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, please.
Yes. So thank you for having me, Kim, and Springfield. So as Kim said, my name is Kara. I am a clinician at Miramont Outpatient Center, which is located in Broomall. We have a couple different locations, part of Mainline Health. My main focus at Miramont is running our adolescent intensive outpatient program. You will also find me doing level of care assessments and doing some PHP, so partial hospitalization programs as well. So I work with a lot of adolescents. The 14 to 18-year-old high school time is kind of who I spend all my time with. I learn all the new words. It's very fun. But I am excited to talk about this today because I tend to have a lot of conversations, more than I thought I would have actually, around alcohol use with adolescents specifically, and the benefits of, stopping or not using until a certain age, or maybe not at all, right? And kind of how to navigate conversations with teenagers who oftentimes are a lot more smarter and more clever than a lot of people give them credit for too, and also have access to a ton of information right now. So as Kim said, there's a lot of negative effects that we know for our health long term. If you talk to a teenager, as all of our attendees most likely do on a daily basis, long-term goals and long-term decisions and health stuff is not always the best kind of bargaining chip with a teenager. They're more interested developmentally in kind of black and white thinking and shorter term goals. So I believe the next part of this slide is just kind of the role of alcohol in our culture, right? So where are we meeting our teens at this point? So it has been a part of our culture forever. And if you look on things like how it is advertised, and the panelists were just having a conversation about kind of that advertising trajectory of alcohol, what we see in our grocery stores now, as Pennsylvania had started to integrate beer sales and wine sales into grocery stores. It's incredibly hard to miss, right? You always kind of have to pass it by. And it's a total cornerstone in our society. I saw a patient 2 days ago, I didn't tell Kim about this yet, who recently, she's in early recovery from alcohol use disorder. And she said to me, I can't believe I'm never going to be able to celebrate something again. And the idea that celebration and drinking were the same to her. And so kind of being able to untangle what, our culture, as Kim puts it, is our cultural, drug of choice. And also thinking about, how we model to our children. If you drink and you have kids, even if, if you're drinking in what you view a moderate, a social kind of way, what we're showing to our kids about what is culturally acceptable. Right. We're kind of heading into the gift giving season, and a lot of gifts are kind of, whether they're, fun gifts or funny gifts, they revolve a lot around alcohol, right? When you come in for a holiday party, it's saying, oh, hey, what do you want to drink? We have beer, we have wine, we have this, right? So just kind of being mindful around those conversations as well. And, mommy juice, we see that all the time, right? That this is a stressful time of year. It's stressful, kind of stressful life sometimes, right? So making sure that we're not equating alcohol with the coping skill. So with that being said, I don't know where this goes. Yes, the idea of the 21st birthday being the time to binge drink, to get drunk. It's okay if you get sloppy. It's okay if you do all of these things, right? We kind of want to start to unpack that a little bit, and have conversations around what else, right? A lot of the time in the first conversation with teens, when they join my program, specifically the IOP, we have an abstinence policy, right? The expectation is that it's illegal, one, but more importantly, we're not going to be consuming any substances while you're in this program, because we're trying to build coping skills that don't involve substances. We're also trying to figure out, how we can best support our mental health without substances, and kind of start to, wire some good connections, as we'll talk about later. So why are we so focused on adolescence, and why are we so focused on not starting use, even though, some people view it as kind of, it's fine, it's just a little bit, it's in my house, I know my child is safe, I know they're just with their friends, right? It's because 1 in 4 Americans who began using any addictive substance before age 18 developed an addiction, and that comes from National Center on Addiction and Substance Use at Columbia. And then 1 in 25 Americans who began using any addictive substance after the age of 21 developed an addiction. So that is a pretty staggering amount, that if we can just kind of hold off in those critical years, kind of let the brain develop, it's such a critical time, that it really can make a difference. And why it's important for all of you here as parents, guardians, caregivers, grandparents, whoever you are to these kids, is that when kids learn about the risks of substance use from their parents, they are 50% less likely to misuse substances, right? So while sometimes I know it can feel like we are talking to our teen and nothing is getting through or nothing is being absorbed, it is, and it is making a difference. And again, here, right, just showing that parents have the most influence on whether or not their child will drink alcohol. And as a therapist, I hear this as well, whether it's parents sharing their own experience with whether or not the parent drinks, right, whether it is they are in recovery, whether they don't drink for other reasons, health reasons, just because they don't want to, because they don't like it. It's important to have those conversations with your kids, because things stick, right? And so when we kind of code drinking alcohol as what we need after a rough day, or what I need to have fun or help me relax, or socialize, we are modeling that for the adolescents in our lives. So if we have a really tough day at work, come home saying, I need a glass of wine, I need to unwind, right? The example that I've heard Kim, use many a time is, I had a really rough day at work. I think I'm going to go take a walk to kind of blow off some steam. Do you want to come with me? Kind of including your child in that healthy way to cope with stress. Our kids are stressed out. I think that everyone can probably see that stressed out kids look different depending on the kid. It could be the kid that is as Kim talked about, the overachiever that is so stressed out about school that you're like, whoa, you need to just like calm down, right? Or it could be the kid that is so stressed out that they've now rejected everything and they present as depressed, not motivated. So either way, just kind of thinking to yourself, kind of doing like a little self-inventory of what do I turn to a substance for, and how can I shift that and model something different to my kid?
Sorry.
No worries. So going back to some data. So when we look, this is from the Monitoring the Future National Survey. If we look here, so the orange red line is 12th grade, 10th grade is the blue circles, and 8th grade are the green squares here. So when we look over time, we see that there has been a decrease in alcohol use over the last, when we poll, have you used alcohol in the last 12 months from these high schoolers. However, as Kim mentioned, and here's in the last 30 days. So as Kim mentioned too, it is still the most prevalent substance. So this is now it compared to cannabis, nicotine, and vaped cannabis, because, you can deliver cannabis in many ways. So it is still the most prevalent. So we get a lot of talk of like, why are we still talking about alcohol? Because it's still the most used, right? That's not to say that everyone is using it. That is kind of a big misconception. And I kind of hear it a lot in conversations with high schoolers of like, well, everyone drinks at the homecoming dance, right? Everyone drinks home at the football game. And a simple like, oh my gosh, really? Right? Does everyone? And I'm a bit sarcastic. That's kind of my style. So do with it what you will. But when you actually start to investigate that and ask open-ended questions, you'll find that, oh, well, like Sally and Jill don't drink and this person doesn't drink. You kind of find avenues to explore, healthier choices. And it is winter now. I can't even remember June and July. But if you look at the number of adolescents younger than 18 using alcohol for the first time, we have January, which is coming up, June, July, and December, which is also coming up. So think about holidays, think about breaks, think about, school events, and also think about, the summer months. I also see these months as times of transition, right? Any time of transition or adjustment might stir up maybe it's just some mild anxiety, some depression, or just feelings of like, this is uncomfortable, right? And depending on, what's modeled, what's available, and things like that, they might say, well, okay, I've seen this person, take a drink. I think that relaxes people, right? So then we're going to start to engage in that behavior as well. But just something to be on the lookout for. So research has shown that the key risk periods for drug and alcohol use are during major transitions in children's life, as I said, and it can be something as simple as like a grade change, right? And feeling like we have, I'm a senior now, I can do this, or I'm senior now and I'm stressed out because I don't know what I'm going to do next year, or I'm feeling stressed about, something going on, or my grades, or it can be like moving schools. I had a patient who switched schools and was engaging in a lot of substance use that she reported was not kind of her norm, because she was trying to find the people that she fit in with at her new school and was just happy to have friends. And so wasn't as worried about the fact that those friends were using substances. And those friends are not bad people, right? They're also kids that are making choices. And sometimes kids don't make the healthiest of choice. So, and this is why we continue to care about this, is now looking at young adults. So kind of that like emerging adulthood. So, 18 to 24-ish. I don't know if this is 19 to 30. Okay. Larger range for this study. 81.8% of young adults drank in the past year. 66.3% of young adults drank in the past month. And then this one is always staggering to me, that 13% of young adults had 10 or more drinks in a row in the past 2 weeks. And this was the highest recorded since it was first measured in 2005. And this is where we start, but we continue to be concerned about elevation in risky impulsive behaviors, right? Especially if we are, working with a young adult or a late teen that does have underlying, mental health concerns, underlying just stressors in their life. And we also see like the 81%, that's a stark increase from the high schoolers that we were seeing too. So it does escalate. So what everyone here is, hopefully trying to answer by attending this is, what can parents of teens do? Clear boundaries, right? Whether or not it's a boundary that your child is happy with is sometimes not as important, but having consistency. Kids like consistency. It feels safe to them. It can kind of feel like that whiplash effect if boundaries are always being moved, rules are always being adjusted. So having clear boundaries around alcohol use in your home, including refusing to supply alcohol to anyone under 21 years old. That is a pretty simple, simply stated, not always simply done, but like simply stated boundary to hold. The same child that I was talking about who moved and was kind of falling into some substance use, she talked about her older brother. His friends would come over and would drink all my parents' beer, and the parents were kind of like, whatever, they're seniors, right? Well, that was also making it really hard for her to maintain her abstinence from substances in that time too. So we really got to like think about everyone that's in the home and how it's impacting us, and also just keeping that, like, if we can delay the first use, then we can really make a difference. Being at home when your teen has a party, right? Because teens can have parties that don't involve substances. So just making sure that you are there, you are someone that they can go to if they need anything, and also can kind of keep an eye on things as needed. And being transparent and thoughtful about your family history of substance use. I cannot tell you how important this is. And I know that this can be sensitive for some people and feel like they're disclosing something personal that maybe weren't intending to disclose to their child. But like I said, teenagers really respect honesty. They respect transparency. And so a parent or a caregiver sharing something like this is usually not taken lightly by teenagers. And it really does make a difference. And creating alcohol-free opportunities and activities in your home so teens feel welcome. Listening to their thoughts about alcohol respectfully, and correcting misinformation when you hear it. Those 2 bullet points, I just want to plug. One of my favorite, communication delivery systems is motivational interviewing, as Kim knows. And there's an acronym, it's OARS, OARS, like with the boat. And it's for open-ended questions, affirmations, reflection, and summary. And when I'm done talking, I'll put that in the chat. Basically, how to listen thoughtfully to teenagers is to ask open-ended questions and actually wait for them to respond, actually hear them out. Try to, as I'll talk about later, like, take a breath yourself, just listen to what they're saying. Okay, and I'm going to affirm, thank you so much for telling me that. It seems like you've actually done a lot. You've done a lot of your own, research into this. And I really appreciate you talking to me about this, reflecting. I hear you saying XYZ and then summarizing. I heard you say that I asked you this, you told me this, right? And I would just like to share that I went to be a part of the conversation and learned this, and then kind of talk about what you learn and what you know. And like I said, they're, as I'm sure all of you know, they're smart, right? They can engage in this thoughtful conversation when we give them an opportunity to. So read signs that you are not ready to begin a conversation, right? If you are, emotionally elevated, if you just, if your teenager just walked in after a football game and you can see that they're drunk and you are mad and you feel your face and you feel your kind of heart start to beat, I wouldn't want to enter a conversation that way, especially one that is as important as this. I would say, I'm feeling frustrated, or I'm feeling mad. I would like to have this conversation with you later, right? Be really clear. Again, those like kind of firm boundaries and clear communications. Additionally, be ready to listen. Like I said, right? When you ask a question, let them answer. Regulating your anxiety and being aware of your body language, right? Like the finger pointing, and kind of making sure that you, like I said, are ready to engage in a conversation. and be consistent, follow through, and try to be unified with the other parent or caregiver or guardian in this situation. Like I alluded to before, teenagers especially need those boundaries. They don't need a bazillion rules, right? But the ones that they have need to be consistent, because it gets confusing. And also, again, they're smart. They know where loopholes lie, right? So I'm going to toss it back to Kim for a bit to talk about parent perspectives on alcohol and underage drinking.
Thanks, Kara. Wonderful. Yep. And I wanted to jump in here just because I am a parent. My children are in their 30s now. One of them has been sober for 13 and a half years. The other one actually chooses to abstain from alcohol use entirely because she has a lot of mental health challenges that she knows. She actually has a lot of red flags for alcohol use or any other kind of substance use. But I can tell you, I have learned a lot in the 13 years since my son found recovery and sobriety. And so I like to, and because of the work that I've been doing ever since then, I talk to so many family members who have a lot of ideas and thoughts about alcohol use and ways that they can protect their child. And I will say that I probably would have co-signed on some of these ideas years ago, but I've learned a lot. And one of my missions in life, and the whole reason I have to be a part of the conversation, is I want to share what I learned, because I learned a lot, and I wish I knew then what I know now. So one of the kind of I don't want to call it a myth, but like just the perspectives that some parents might have is, well, we have an agreement with our child that if they drink, they can call us for a ride and we'll come and get them with no questions asked. And I want to say there's a kind of a twist on that. If our child is at a party where they don't want to drink and there's drinking and they want to call us and get a ride with no questions asked, 100% on board with that. I love that. However, to say, if you choose to drink, I'm going to come and get you and I won't ask any questions. I'm not going to agree to that necessarily any longer, because I realize I'm going to need to do some motivational interviewing with my child, as Kara just talked about. I'm going to need to find out why they made this decision to drink. And the reality of it is, too, once our child has made the decision to drink, they know they're not supposed to because they're underage, but they've made that decision to drink. Now they're inebriated. Is that really when they're going to suddenly be responsible and say, you know what, I really shouldn't have done this. Can you come and get me? It's pretty unlikely, because they don't want us to know they've been doing it. Most likely they want to keep it quiet. And we've heard kids say, I don't want my parents to see me drunk, so I'm going to do my best to get home and not, hurt myself or somebody else. And so it's just unfortunately not a good idea. It's just not a safe way to proceed, and to kind of say carte blanche, okay with us if you drink, as long as you give us a call and don't drive. We really don't want our kids drinking underage, as Kara talked about the many reasons why. Another thing that I hear a lot is, and actually somebody asked a question in advance about like what happens when you travel to Europe, but this is what I hear from parents is like, well, in Europe and other countries, their drinking age is much lower. Kids will have like a little bit, mixed in with some water at dinner when they're really young. Well, they have actually, it says they have less alcoholism. Actually, European countries have much higher incidence of alcohol use and binge drinking and underage drinking. Obviously, underage meaning compared to our norm or our legal limit, which is 21. But there actually is a greater incidence of young people having problems with alcohol use and developing alcohol use disorder, because again, they have the same kind of brain development that our kids do, right? So if they're under the age of 25, actually, when our frontal lobe is finally fully developed at about the age of 25 or 26, they start drinking younger. Of course, they're going to have more problems. It doesn't matter what country you live in. This is universal. And so unfortunately, this is kind of getting into that forbidden fruit mentality. Like, well, in Europe, they're allowed to, so they don't have problems. That seems like a great hypothesis. It just doesn't bear out. And it kind of also goes into this. Here we have the forbidden fruit again. So they're going to drink, I'd rather they drink at home. It's safer if they drink at home. At least I know they're here. I've taken their keys, so they're not going to drive. But unfortunately, and again, we talked to a lot of people in recovery, and you're going to hear from one of them tonight, but I've heard people say like, oh yeah, I used to go to those parties and I would give them the keys to the Volkswagen we haven't owned for 3 years. Just to give, we know how to get around this, right? So I'll give you some keys. You don't know that they're not my actual keys. The reality is we're again saying it's okay with us if you drink. It's not legal. And we're telling our kids that this is so important to your social life that we're going to let you break this. We're going to break this law as adults. We're going to say it's okay for you. And it just, the reality of it is that permissiveness does not lead to lower use. It increases the use actually. So just not enough evidence to support this at all, that this is a good idea. I'm sorry to say. And our kids have so many opportunities to make friends. They don't have a whole lot of opportunities for parents. Usually it's one or two, maybe a few more if you have a blended family, but we are their parents, not their friend. And we might make some unpopular decisions about what we'll allow in our home, but that's on us, right? That's our role. And we hope that I wish I knew so much of this before, because I really didn't have a lot of information about the importance of delaying that onset of use. I don't want to be the one to introduce a substance to my child's developing brain. I would really much rather they understand that, nope, it's just not okay with us. And we can make connections with our kids in really healthy ways and talk about things other than our worries. It's so important to keep this kind of continuum of connection so that when something comes up, we can talk about it without it being the only thing that we're focused on. We have this kind of really beautiful communication and respectful relationship. And then just, this is basic prevention 101, right? Is having tech-free time together. Family table, the devices go away. We're going to just talk to each other, have a healthy meal, and find ways to connect without being distracted, and really focusing on our kids and learning about their day and ups and downs and all of that. And encouraging our kids to talk about the tough decisions that they have to make. What's easy, what's not so easy. Really, Kara does such a great job talking about motivational interviewing. So I really appreciate that. Kara, do you want to jump in here? I'm sorry, I think I probably overstepped a couple of slides there.
No, you're all good. Yeah, I think, everything that you're saying, I'm nodding along enthusiastically too, because it is all the same stuff that I would say. So, definitely with the tech-free time, make, like, when we are presenting that, if that's not something you already do in your home, if that's something you'd like to incorporate, that presenting it not as a punishment, right? Not as well, you're always on your phone, so we're going to have tech-free time, right? Including yourself in that conversation. I think all of us probably spend maybe a little bit more than a little, too much time on our phones, right? And have maybe some trouble disconnecting. So saying something like, I've really been noticed that I'm like attached to my phone and I'm not being super present. I think that, your parent and I think we're going to try and do like a no phone dinner. Do you want to do that with us? Right? Kind of inviting in instead of telling. And then also, and like I said, holding boundaries, right? But having that tech-free time together. And also, I think the next slide was about talking about the right decisions as well. That goes back to those affirmations. When affirmations are genuine, right? When it's not just like, great job, or they kind of fall flat, but they're really saying, I'm really proud of you that you were at that party, you made the decision not to drink, you were feeling uncomfortable, and you talked to me. That really made me feel proud of you. Are you feeling proud of yourself, right? Are you feeling like that was an easy decision for you to make? Was that a tough one? And in conversations around parties and around, parents coming to pick kids up from parties. I know when I was in high school around this area as well, that was a really frequent thing. Like, doesn't matter, we'll pick you up, right? And everyone would be drinking. I think that there's also a difference between saying, I'll pick you up if you're drunk, and saying, if you are unsafe, I will always come get you, right? Like, you can still be that safe, dependable person and not be permissive of underage drinking. So just in general, I think connecting with our kids, right? If the first time that you're having like a real sit down, deep conversation with your child in a while is telling them not to drink, it probably won't go very well, right? Even if they had no plans on drinking, kids at this age, right? It's normal, one, to get in more fights at this age, to have them be more argumentative. Two, it is normal for them to want more privacy and to not want to tell you as many things, right? They're trying to differentiate, they're trying to become their own person. So if your first time talking to them in a one-on-one setting in a deeper way is saying, don't do this, it's not going to go great. I would, predict. But if we start to try to have just some continued quality time with them about good stuff, about, hey, I really want to get into like yoga, or I want to start walking after work. Would you want to do that with me? That's kind of the place that can be like the catalyst for these kinds of conversations.
And I would add well, I like what you just said about like, I'm going to start a yoga class or whatever, you're going to come with me. Ask them what they want to do too, right? Like, what are you into? What should I know about? I know sometimes we hear parents say like, I don't get why they're always playing whatever, Fortnite, whatever it is. And I've heard other adolescent therapists say like, ask them to teach you how to play, like that's a great way to spend some time with them, right?
Yep. And you will be shocked at how much more an adolescent is willing to share when you're not sitting across from them eye to eye, right? When you're doing an activity, when they're teaching you how to, play the video games, which I'm still learning myself. That's not my my field, but I'm trying. So I completely agree with that, Kim.
Sorry. Come on, there we go.
And this is one of Kim's slides, and I love it dearly. A lot of the times people will say to adolescents, your brain isn't fully developed yet. What are you doing? Right. And yeah, it's true. But kind of a more positive spin on that is this is the perfect time to build great brain chemistry. What fires together is wiring together. You are at such a good time. Man, I wish I could go back and, teach these habits to myself and learn that I love exercise, or I love, journaling or painting, right? Like, I wish I could have built those coping skills when I was younger, and kind of giving them the opportunity to make good choices and communicating to them that you believe in their ability to make good choices too.
Awesome. Thanks, Kara. Okay. I'm so excited to introduce you to my friend Lewis. He's presented with us many times, and I'm so grateful to him. Anytime we have somebody in recovery, we can have experts on with all kinds of fancy initials after their name, but hearing a personal story is everything. No pressure there, Lewis, but I mean, it really does help us so much to understand this. We, as a parent who's been through it, I can tell you that I was highly emotional when I was struggling with what was happening with my child, and to hear somebody else talk it really does help see it through that lens. And so I'm very grateful to you, Lewis, for always saying yes.
Well, thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, just making sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Lewis. I'm an alcoholic in recovery. My sobriety date is July 1st, 2019. That's the first time I had to pause and think about that, which is kind of cool. It means it's getting further away, right? First, I just want to say how amazing it is that everyone here is taking the time to invest in their children's health and really learn how to help your children. I think that's so amazing that you would take the time to do that. And I'm happy to be here to shed whatever light I can. So I think in addition and in line with everything that we talked about so far about the reasons why it's important for our kids not to drink underage, is that in my eyes, and what I've learned is it's very likely that there's a reason that they are choosing to drink. And that the reason is probably beyond everyone's doing it. Now, Kara mentioned something earlier. It's easily stated or simply stated than simply done. And I think that's true too, because the day I walked in to rehab, they asked me how much I was drinking and why was I drinking. And I told them how much I was drinking, which was a lot. And I didn't really know why. I literally told them it's just what I do. Because at that point in my life, like, I had no idea why I started drinking, when I started drinking. It just became part of my daily routine and my habit. So if we back up, what I learned in the past 4.5 years and what I learned at that treatment center, is everything in my life that led up to me drinking. So if I start back to the beginning, I grew up in Delaware County. I have two siblings, and my parents. We all lived together, and we had a really great childhood. Like, on paper and in person, it was great. I was the oldest of our siblings. We were all very active in sports or the arts, and we all just really supported each other. Our parents were always there to support us, and we were just an active, loving bunch. As far back as I can remember, being included or being a part of was extremely important to me. I remember my parents, neither of them have huge families, but where they made up was with their friends. And during football season, every Sunday, they'd invite all our friends over to this, funny enough, this exact basement I'm sitting in now. And they'd all friends would always come over for the Eagles games. And when that happened, my dad had a bar built in the basement with all these TVs around. And at 6, 7, 8, 9 years old, that's where you'd find me sitting at the bar, not drinking yet, but just with the guys, trying to be included and trying to be a part of. And that just continued all through my entire life. And it was just so important for me at the end of the day to be included. And I didn't really understand why then, but I've learned now that the reason that was so important to me is because when I wasn't at home, when I was at school, I was in a totally different situation. It was a totally different story. And when I was in second and third grade of elementary school, I was bullied every single day. Physically bullied, mentally bullied. It was rough. I mean, they'd pick on me because I have small feet. I still have small feet. Now I use it to my advantage because children's sneakers are cheaper than adult size sneakers, but look who's laughing now. But they bully me for that. They bully me because if I didn't have like the latest fashion trends, but physically, it always came in the recess yard. We played football every day, and every day shirt was ripped, pants were ripped, you name it. And I never asked for help, and I never really told anyone. And to this day, it's hard for me to figure out why. But what I did do every day would go to the nurse's office, and I'd go to the nurse's office and I would complain of anything I could to get her to call my mom, because I knew if I got my mom on the phone, that chances were likely that I would get picked up. So I'd say my asthma was bad. I had a headache, anything but the actual truth of like what I was feeling. So I did that for a long period of time, and then eventually I ended up in an altercation, found myself into some trouble with the school, and then I felt forced to tell the truth and forced to say why I retaliated against the bullies and whatnot. So I finally share my truth. I finally share what's going on, and my parents, being super supportive, enrolled me into a new school. When I got to the new school, I was super overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed because on paper, everything was supposed to be a fresh start. This was a great school. But I just had so much going on in my mind, and I couldn't really see. It was tough for me to see how this was going to be any different. Because I had spent the last 2 years of my life being bullied and choosing not to tell anyone about it, because for me, being included and being a part of was more important than getting help. So it was hard for me to see how anything would change. So when I got to this school in fourth grade, they started asking me if I was going out for the school musical or if I was going to join the school choir. And I immediately said no, because at my old school, that wasn't any way to help with the bullying. Like if you were part of the arts or singing or anything like that, that was not the cool thing to do. What happened was there were, I think, 57 kids in our class. And when it came time for like the elective period of the day, 54 went to choir practice. And then it was me and 3 other kids that were left alone trying. I forget what they had us do. I have no idea what they made us do. However, here I am left out again. So then when that rolled around, the next year when that time rolled around and everybody asked me if I wanted to join, I said yes immediately because I wanted to be included. What ended up happening was it turns out I was actually a good singer. I was pretty good at acting. And I just found this new thing that I really love doing, in addition to playing sports, which I've been playing my whole life. And this is when I hit this crossroads of trying to figure out who I was and who I wanted to be. And again, I just want to mention again that I am learning this all now post-treatment. When I was in active alcoholism and active drinking, I was not drinking every day saying, I'm drinking because I don't know who I am. These are all things I figured out later. But that was the first time where I had this love and this talent for choir and the arts and athletics, still playing football, lacrosse in the spring, I'm pretty good at both. And somewhere along the lines when I was growing up, and I can't point to exactly where, I thought that you had to choose one path or the other, and that it wasn't possible for me to be both of these people. You couldn't be the arts and the athlete because they just didn't mix. So when I graduated from that grade school, I went to high school, I was switching schools again. I felt like I had to choose which person I was going to be. For me, I stuck with athletics because it came a little more naturally to me. It was easier to pick up where I left off. And also I saw a lot of people that I've sort of known already doing it. They were already on the football team. And then fast forward a little bit, sophomore year, when I was 16 years old, my parents get divorced. So you can kind of see this trend of me having a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of trying to figure out where I belong socially, and now throw into the mix that my parents get divorced and I'm the oldest of 3 siblings. So there's 3 years between my sister and I, 6 years between my brother and I. And this is when things they started out slow, but eventually I'm sitting here, they got off the rails. So when my parents split, we just didn't really talk about it. I remember the night or day that my parents told us that they were going to get divorced. And for me, it felt like, if you're ever watching a movie and the main character is still, but there's like a million things happening around them, that's what that moment felt like for me. It felt like this moment of, I can hear what people are saying, but in one ear, out the other, and this kind of like full body shutdown. And I just didn't really know how I was going to manage it. So I just didn't. And one thing that made me feel better or not feel anything at all was alcohol. Alcohol allowed me to kind of become whoever I wanted to be, and basically create whatever situation I felt like I wanted to be in. When my parents split, they eventually went into different homes, and we were meant to switch houses every Friday. When we switched houses, more times than not, the person whose house we were not at, so if we were at mom's house, dad wasn't home. which left me with an open house nearly every single weekend in high school, starting in my sophomore year. So I took full advantage of that, and I had parties Friday and Saturday almost every day. And what I've learned, I learned when I got to college that the people I was friends with in the group in my high school, we probably drank more sophomore and junior year of high school than anybody in college ever did. And it was because it was an escape. It was an escape for me to not worry about what my little brother and sister were up to, not worry about if my parents were okay, not worrying about where do I fit in. I fit in because I was the one hosting the party, and all the attention was on me as long as I could drink the most. And that just continued all through high school. Because of that, my grades were terrible. It's not that I was failing tests and assignments, it's that I was just straight up like not doing assignments, because to me, any assignment that a teacher was going to give me, there was no way. I couldn't see how it was going to benefit me. So I wasn't wasting my time on something I couldn't see benefited me. The beautiful thing about recovery and being an active recovery and working a program is that I continuously learn more about myself and more about my journey. So just 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in a 12-step meeting and I was listening to someone share about their experience in going through school. And I used to say that I didn't do homework or assignments. I didn't go to school. I didn't do anything because I didn't care. And the assignments didn't matter to me and they weren't going to help me. I think part of that is still true. But I think what resonates with me even more now is that anything that I had trouble with as the complexity of math started going up, as research papers started coming up in English, anything that I may have needed help with, I was too afraid to ask for help because I didn't want to put another burden on my family. So as my parents are going through divorce, I was more concerned that my brother and sister were taken care of, more concerned mom was okay, more concerned dad was okay, and felt that if I had asked for help with my problems, that it would take away from what they were already dealing with. No one told me that that was the case. No one told me they didn't have time. No one told me I needed to have everything together for my family. It's just something that naturally happened internally. So I just didn't. And because of that, got into none of the colleges I applied to. I ended up eventually going to a smaller school that accepted me for freshman year, and then I transferred to Shippensburg University. When I got to Shippensburg, nothing much has changed socially, right? Except for I stopped being an athlete because size does matter once you start to get to Division II football, and I was not big enough to play. So, but socially, things are staying the same. I'm continuing to party. I actually joined a fraternity when I got to college because it seemed like it's what I should do. I eventually became president of that fraternity, and that reason is a little different. I became president of the fraternity because it was basically an excuse for my drinking and my active alcoholism. Stereotypically, the first thing everyone thinks about when you hear about frat president, like that's what I was thinking about. So there's no one that's going to tell the president of the fraternity that he's too drunk, or the president of the fraternity that he can't drink on a Tuesday. It was a defense mechanism so that no one could get in and control my coping mechanism. Eventually, I found my first love in broadcasting, and I was a news anchor on our college station. We broadcasted football games live. I was a sports broadcaster. I loved everything about it because it brought back that arts and kind of that acting part of me and combine that athlete part of me that I had let go of, and it merged my two worlds and finally felt like I was on the path of like really discovering who I am. Unfortunately, my passion for that wasn't strong enough for me to put down alcohol. And eventually, I got caught for showing up to the news station drunk to deliver the news on Thursday evenings. And the result of that is that I was suspended from anchoring the news anymore. That should have caused me to take a deeper look into why I was drinking and why I had become a daily drinker, but it didn't. It just fueled my fire, allowed me to push things down even more and continue on my path. Amazingly, I had 3 job offers leaving college. And the one I took, I moved to Westchester, Pennsylvania after I left. And I hated the job that I took. And I wrote some notes earlier of what Kara and Kim were mentioning of like what I thought it was to be an adult, no matter where I learned it from. I thought I came home from work. I hated my job. I wanted to complain about my boss. So I'd flip on the news and grab a beer. The difference is I'm 22 years old, not 62 years old. So I really had no reason to be complaining and watching the news as religiously as I did. But I thought that was normal. A couple beers every night turned into a 6-pack every night, turned into me buying small pint bottles of liquor, turning into full bottles of liquor, turned into handles. By the time I got help, I was drinking a handle and a half of alcohol every single day. Somehow still barely functioning. All of this kind of came to a head when I was my last year of college. I met this girl that I was seeing, and on and off we had been dating. The reason why it was on and off is because I was a terrible partner, boyfriend, just like human, really. There were a number of places that we were living in together that I kicked her out of for just pure like gaslighting and me blaming things on her that weren't her fault. So we were on and off for probably about 3-4 years. One night in 2019, I was at her apartment and we had gotten into an argument. Both of us are kind of yelling at each other, and the cops were called a couple of times by neighbors to come check on us. We got through that, but what it ended up being was this girl, her name's Steph, telling me that really she didn't want anything to do with me anymore, and that the person I had become was really changing who she was, and basically she couldn't stand to put up with excuse me. She couldn't stand to put up with who I'd become any longer. At this point in my life, I still had my family. I definitely wasn't open with the amount I was drinking. I was incredibly dishonest about the relationship. I would always tell my parents that anything that happened in the relationship was Steph's fault, because if I had said that things were my fault, it would have shed a light on my drinking. So I didn't have too many people around me that I could trust. So when Steph told me that she didn't want anything to do with me anymore, I knew I had to start getting honest. So I shared with her that I'd been drinking every day, that I'd been drinking at work, that I had, just been around the clock drinker, and I hated myself for it, and that I really wanted help and I wanted to talk to someone, but I didn't know what I wanted to talk about. I didn't know what was happening and why it was happening. All of these things I just kind of outpoured. And she said that she would support me, and she said she'd be there with me every step of the way. But her only condition was that I had to make a call that night, because we had these conversations before and I never made a call. So together we called my parents, got honest with them, and told them what was going on. And the next day, I got on a plane to Florida and was in treatment for 90 days. When I was in treatment, I started to uncover everything that I just talked about with you. Uncovered that the effect that the bullying had throughout my whole life, and the fact that being shut out for so long created this huge need for me to be recognized, for me to be acknowledged, and to be comfortable. It also caused me to take this parental role through my parents' divorce and be there for my siblings when no one asked me to. And, you know, the biggest thing about me being in treatment at the specific facility was how important family was in the process. So both of my parents came for a week each. The girl that I was seeing came down. I was writing letters to her. I wrote letters to her family. Really just all had, my siblings came. We just had open dialogue, and we had dialogue about things that we never talked about before. So we finally sat together in a room and talked about my parents' divorce, talked about the role each of us played in it, things we could have done better, but that we'll look to do better in the future. And because of that, now relationships with my family are a whole lot better. I think one thing that we all do is try to be extremely honest with each other now. And, when something comes up or something's bothering us, we try to have that conversation off the bat instead of harboring resentments. The girl who said she stuck by me, this is the dramatic part. She became my wife. We got married a year ago. And we have 2 children now. I have a 2.5-year-old son, and I have a 9-month-old daughter. Which is just amazing to think about where we've come in, how far I've come, how far we've come as a family unit in 4.5 years. And I can honestly tell you that my recovery to this point and the stage in life where I'm at would not be possible without all the commitment that my family, my wife and her family included, put into it. Because alcohol is not like cigarettes, right? It's a different kind of addiction. You don't just stop it, and if you stop long enough, hopefully it'll be over. What I learned from being in treatment long term and having my family involved is all the reasons why I was drinking that I could have never come up with on my own. So if I could, I know we'll do a Q&A, but if I could shed any light or give advice on what I think would have changed my experiences, just when you're having these conversations with your children, and they're so persistent on drinking, is just really try to ask why, because I can almost guarantee it might take a couple tries to get there, but I can almost guarantee that there's something that they're burying deeper down that they need a substance to feel part of and to be included. I never had those conversations. We didn't really have programs like this to educate me and my family on. So again, I just close with gratitude of be a part of the conversation, and for all of you being here, for letting me share my story, and hopefully it helps one person. And if I could I share my story as much as I can, because we always say if we can help one person by sharing our story, it makes it all worth it. So thank you.
Lewis, that was so great. Thank you very much. I don't know if you happen to notice the little hearts floating around when you got to the the dramatic part of your story, as you said. That was very sweet. Thank you very much for that. I really appreciate it. And while I have you, and I'm sorry, I know you're fighting whatever little respiratory thing you got going on there, but I do love this one question that I had mentioned to you before we got started. This question about, is it bad for kids to see their parents drink, even if moderately or responsibly? And I know you said you had a few thoughts about that.
Yeah. I love this question. I'm just reading it again here. So I do not think it's bad for children to see their parents drink, as long as the parents are drinking responsibly. I think any time that you can model for your children, I guess I don't know if I should say the correct way to do things, but model for your children the way to act according to your family's values is beneficial. If you think about what I think about this, I think about my dad and my grandfather telling me to be closer to the street than the woman when you're walking down the sidewalk, or make sure you open the door for a woman. Those are all things that I witnessed them do. Therefore, I started doing myself. So if you translate that into drinking, and I see parents having a glass of wine, or even a little bit more than that, but making sure they're getting home safe. If you do have an occasion where maybe you've consumed more than you like, things got a little ugly, having an honest conversation with your child the next day. Hey, daddy had a little too much to drink last night. I shouldn't have done that. Here's what was going on with me. Just wanted to, put it out there. I think that there's ways you can model the behavior of how you would want your child to act in the future, just like anything else. And if you're not able to do that, then I would say don't drink in front of your children. But if you can do it in an appropriate way and model the behavior, I think it's probably the best advice and experience a child can have.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think also just to remember that as kids, we all want to be grown up, right? We all want to be like our parents. We want to be grown ups. And to glorify it in any way just might really kind of contribute to that. I not too long ago was with some folks who were not connected to the field that I work in now. And I saw them with their 13-year-old saying like, well, you can have just a sip. And they were like, kind of, this is mommy and daddy stuff. And it's just, it's just very alluring and tempting. And again, why is this so important that they have to have a sip of that? Do they need to have, a taste of something else that doesn't really, appeal to them? Because really what child is interested in drinking alcohol unless they want to be like the grownups, right? So, and I don't know if Kara or Dr. Les, if either of you want to jump in on any of these, please do share your thoughts.
I think you covered it for that first one. Nothing different that I had. I don't know, Dr. Lutz, if you had anything. I do see that there was a question that came in earlier about tips for talking with teens about alcohol. So examples of questions, conversation starters, how you might skillfully respond, and things like that. So just to kind of reiterate some of the points that Kim and I and Lewis all talked about. First of all, I think having conversations with your children that don't include big topics, and also not approaching it as like this big scary topic that I have to talk to you about this, right? Like I went to this program and now I have to talk about this because I'm really worried, right? No, let's like kind of work it into normal conversations. Let's work it into, activities that we're going to do with our kids. I think that as Lewis talked about, sometimes the answer or the why is pretty deep rooted, and it can be something pretty serious or something, pretty difficult for a child to say. And I think importantly, a lot of the times or some of the times it can be difficult for a parent to hear too. So when you are broaching these conversations with your children, making sure that we are, like I said, regulating not only how we're going into the conversation, but your child could potentially say something to you that hurts, right? They might say something and your initial reaction is, oh my gosh, well, I didn't mean to do that, right? Well, that wasn't my intention, right? And it likely wasn't, but it's how your child is feeling. And if your child is telling you something, whether it has to do with their mental health, whether it has to do with their behaviors, their, opinions on what's going on in the family, or maybe something that they've witnessed or experienced, right? They are trusting you in that moment to hold that space for them. And what I would recommend is later on, right, having someone hold that space for you too, right? Making sure that we're taking care of ourselves when we're having these conversations. So being ready to hear anything, right? Like kind of being open, being willing to hear whatever your child will share with you. And also for conversation starters, it could be, you know, in a couple weeks from now, you're like, oh, I was on this program. I was just thinking that, you know, with high school, and I'm sure, you know, some people around you might be drinking, or maybe it's summer, maybe it's homecomings coming up or prom. You know, I think it's a good time that we talk about, you know, our family history with substance use and addiction. I think it's really important for me to share this with you because I want you to have all of the information when you make decisions, right? Again, kind of putting it on the teenager that we trust, even if we don't fully, right? That we do trust them to make a decision, because at the end of the day, we can't, Kim always talks about the snowplow parent, right? The parent that pushes out all of the obstacles in front of the kid. We can't do that, right? They're going to make decisions on their own, and they're going to make bad decisions. They're going to make the wrong decision. It has to happen. That's how we learn. So knowing that it's never too early to have these conversations is also not too late, right? I'm still learning things all the time. I'm still having hard conversations with my parents. That's life. So kind of knowing that we can talk about our family values, we can talk about our family history, and make that kind of the norm, that we can have these conversations and feeling comfortable and giving yourself a break. These conversations are hard. Lean into your support, lean into your coping mechanisms. And if you're after this presentation thinking like, well, dang, maybe I need to kind of investigate my own self-care, then that's the first step, I think.
Thank you. Go ahead, Dr. Lutz, we're going to add something?
No, I'm just agreeing with Kara. They're hard conversations, but they're really great conversations to have.
I think the other thing that I really agree with Kara on is that it doesn't have to be like, if someone would have came up to me in active alcoholism and say, why do you drink so much? People did ask me that. Like, I don't have an answer for you. If you got into a little bit more about how I was feeling, you might have better luck, especially at a young age. I can tell you that. Look, I'll say this with the anecdote that, like, my parents very well could have tried to have these conversations with me. If they did, I don't remember. And I've shared with Kim before that, like, I wish that there was someone that sat down with me and just really asked me how I felt, especially through that big moment of transition, like the divorce. I felt left to my own imagination about the reasons why it happened, and did I play a part? Whose fault was it? All of these things that for a teenager were a lot. If I'd had those conversations and got into therapy at that time, would I have not become an alcoholic? I don't know. Would it have delayed it? I don't know. But I know that I don't remember having those conversations. So something like that, just about really about feelings before the substances even come into place, can probably, I would think, play a big role.
I really appreciate that you brought that up. A lot of the time when we have programs that are for even parents of younger children, we talk about emotional vocabulary, you know, and the importance of bringing up emotional vocabulary. And like, we have this list that we hand out that's just a huge list of random feelings. And we talk about, like, stick this on your fridge and pick one every day and just say, what do you think it feels like to be frustrated? What does that feel like for you? Or what does it feel like to feel grateful? It's not really emotion, but it's a feeling, right? So just to have, to sort of build that tool chest of vocabulary words so that we can express, like, well, here's a time I felt like this. And we actually, right at the peak of COVID, when everyone was isolated and Zoom with their family, one of our therapists did this cool thing with her parents, who were her kids' grandparents. So the kids every week would have 2 questions that, okay, when we talk next week, I want you to tell me a time that you felt proud, or I want you to tell me a time that you felt scared. And the grandparents the next week would each have a story. And this therapist was like, I learned so much about my parents. I mean, that's a kind of off topic, but you know what I mean? It's just such a good idea to talk about feelings in a way that's not shaming, when you're not in a crisis situation so that you have that ability when you are struggling to reach those words.
It can also be very fun to, I ask my 2-year-old these every day on the way home from school. I say, what made you happy today? And he's 2, so like it's a little bit different, but the answers are things that you wouldn't even imagine, like donuts. Wow, that's amazing. So but I think I do think that approach is amazing, and just really making it normal as a family unit to talk about feelings is so important.
Yep, absolutely.
And to be fair, Lewis, we sell donuts at our high school every week on a Wednesday, and most of our students will report that they are happier on a Wednesday. So
The research bears that out then. There you go.
Everyone loves donuts.
yeah.
So there was another, and by the way, if you have any questions, please go ahead and enter them into the chat or the Q&A. We won't identify you, but we'll ask, we'll discuss it as a panel, but would love to hear from you. I do see another one that was asked in advance. The question was, we don't drink, so how do we incorporate that with possible teen introduction to alcohol? Well, first thing I'll say is that is a terrific protective factor, that you're not drinking in front of your kids. They're not seeing that on a regular basis. So, but I also would like to say that there are some adults who choose not to drink or stop drinking because there's someone like Lewis who is in recovery from alcohol use disorder or alcoholism. So for those folks, there might be a genetic factor that would put our kids at greater risk. The beauty is you're not drinking now. That's great, but if there is a genetic predisposition, I think Kara talked about this earlier, like being totally transparent about this, that, hey, this is something that, I'm sure Lewis is going to have these conversations with his kids at some age, probably a little early now. But, when it's time, just to say, hey, I had this reaction when I tried alcohol. You might have a similar reaction. So I think it would be best for you to not try this as long as possible. If you can avoid this until you're like 21 or even 25, that would be great, because it was a problem for might be just like if we have diabetes, hypertension, any other, genetic maladies, challenges, we would hopefully be open with our children about that and say like, hey, we need to watch our diet and exercise. We got to be careful about asthma, whatever historically our family might look at. So, but for a family where the adults are not drinking, you're kind of ahead of the game with a lot of what we talked about was like how to navigate that so that it isn't too appealing to our kids. So, I think you're in a great place. As far as their introduction, a teen's introduction to alcohol, you can still have the same conversations regardless of your decision whether to drink or not to drink. You can still have the same conversations about why some people do, not to demonize it, but to say, there are a lot of people who are curious about this. Some people love how it feels. Some people love how it feels a little too much, right? Kara, do you have any thoughts about that as well?
It's all what you were saying, and I think giving opportunity for like, do you have any questions about that? And of course, use your good caregiver parental judgment of things that are like developmentally appropriate for them to know, right? And kind of give your the best version of the answer you can. And one thing as you were talking, Kim, that like parent perspectives on drinking that I thought of was this idea that I've heard from parents that I've known, in a friendly way / some patient parents of, well, I want them to drink in my home because I don't want them to go to college and binge drink and have something like happen, right? Like I don't want them to go and drink too much. And I think the idea that we can educate and do like prevention work around binge drinking without your child having to drink and understand what it feels like, right? Like that, those two things are not mutually exclusive. We can still do that education. We can still be that steady person for them and still say, right? And if you're in a dangerous situation, let me know. Even if I'm, states away, we can still help. But I just wanted to point that out because I don't think we talked about that yet, but that's one that I hear a decent amount.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Here's a question. I have a teenage daughter, 14 years old, who always seems to cut me off when I try to talk to her. for example, it's homecoming and there may be some people who want to do something that makes you uncomfortable, cuts me off and yells, I'm not going to do anything. Then I tell her, I just want to make good choices. I really want to focus on, I want her to make good choices. I really want to focus on specifics, but she gets stressed out. So I don't use straightforward words like alcohol, smoking, sex, etc. It's always make good choices in a conversation. How to redirect. I'm looking at Kara and Dr. Lutz. Go ahead. Whoever wants to jump in first.
Go ahead, Kara. You see many of these students every single day, right?
Right. So do you. So you can
Yes.
fit afterwards. But and let me just, I'm just gonna quick reread. So I'm making sure I'm answering it
In the Q&A, yeah.
specific way.
Yeah.
So first of all, just to validate that is such a common experience. Being cut off, being told, right? They're trying, like I said, they're trying to differentiate themselves. They're trying to say, like, I actually either know as much as you or I know more. I know I'm not going to drink, mom, right? I know I'm not going to make these bad decisions. I'm not stupid, right? That's kind of what she's trying to convey there is, of course I'm not, right? But it also does seem like she's like deflecting, right? And I don't know your child, I don't know you. So there could be a lot of different things going on here. But for redirecting, it might be, if you started off with, I want to focus on specifics. Some people, okay, that might make you want to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable, right? And she cuts you off and says, I'm not going to do anything. Again, regulating and being like, oh, okay, that's, I'm happy to hear that. How did you come to that decision, right? What do you know? What do you know? What have your experiences been? Have you seen a friend make a decision like that and it not end well? That can be like that. A lot of teenagers have that experience where they've seen someone get too drunk, or they've seen someone, that's really high or something like that. And that might be a protective factor for them too. So, okay, let's talk about that. And I think some patients, obviously, but saying, I think sometimes I know we try to shy away from straightforward words, but like I said, like teenagers do tend to respond better to being straight up about things. If she says, I know I'm not going to do anything, you can say, okay, I just want to make sure that you're informed. You know all the things that I think I know. I didn't know if I knew that when I was your age, right? Some things like that. And also, like I said, having these conversations paired with activities, specifically, again, the activities that you're not like face to face, playing Fortnite, in the car is always a iffy one for me, because it makes teenagers feel trapped sometimes, like that they're like, oh, I know if I'm on a car ride with my mom, like we're going to have a serious conversation. But if you're on a long car ride, there's also a good opportunity to kind of get into the nitty gritty of some things. Dr. Lutz, do you have something as well?
Yeah, I was going to recommend the same thing. Kind of getting the conversation in a non-stressful situation. I think as parents, we always want to do the reminders as they're walking out the door, or like the week leading up to the event. But probably the best time to have the conversation might be like while you're homecoming dress shopping, right? Because it's a relaxed situation, but you're still thinking about the event. It's a good time to talk about, oh, what are your friends all going to wear, right? Oh, what are you guys planning to do after the dance? Well, what would you do if you got into a sticky situation? So rather than like having necessarily like the make good choices conversation, what would those choices be? Because I think kids always say, well, of course I would make a good choice. Right. But what is your good choice? Because if your good choice is, well, if I get drunk and pass out, my friends are going to call 911 for me, that's probably not a good choice. And I think it's hard for teenagers to come up with those good choices. But if you kind of build it naturally into the conversation, I think that's a great way. TV at night, like, while they're just kind of laying there, you see somebody consuming alcohol on the TV. Hey, what would you do in this situation? Things like that takes the pressure off of them, and they can maybe talk through the character. So.
I just quickly wanted to add, Kara made me think of it. If your child, it says that, I guess what I want to say is you might find out something interesting that could prompt a further conversation with your child by the way they answer. Example, when I was in treatment, I was 26. My brother was 20 years old. My brother, I never had seen him drink once or twice. And I asked him why. And I learned the reason he doesn't drink was because of me, because he saw my decline and how I acted under the influence. That's a great conversation to have with him
Yep.
or your child. Does that stress you out? All of these things that can happen from that conversation. So you never know where it's going to go. Don't always think the worst, I guess.
Right. So true. And the other thing that I'm thinking about just reading what this parent is asking is I'm remembering these really hard conversations with my kids, with my son in particular, when he was making some bad choices as a young person, that when he would get escalated in his emotion, I would too. Like I would get really upset because he's upset now. So if at all possible, okay, I'm hearing this volume come up a little, I'm going to try to, I'm going to try to de-escalate. I'm going to try to like, okay, I can hear you're a little upset by this question. I'm curious about that, just to kind of try to bring the tone down a little bit. And just even like what I always love what Kara talks about motivational interviewing, just to sort of, to validate that, this is something you're not comfortable, seems to me, it's really reflective. I guess it seems to me this is something you're not comfortable talking about. I hope that you can talk to me about something that makes you uncomfortable. We can discuss it later, anything like that, just to kind of try to bring down the volume a little.
And I see that we're at time, but just one more thing I wanted to add with this question is also being mindful of the way you speak or react to what's happening with other adolescents or just other people in like the news and pop culture, right? How do we react when someone goes to substance use treatment? How do we react when someone in our child's, class was drunk at homecoming and had to get her stomach pumped, right? The way that we react to that tells our children how we would react to them sharing something with us. So just being really mindful of that, just kind of as we move through normal conversation with their normal, like everyday conversation with them.
Great point. Really great point. Thank you, Kara. That was an excellent question. Thank you for that. All right, so I'm going to pop everything into the chat one more time. These are all of the links that I put in earlier. Oops, I'm not going to change who I'm sending it to. Okay, and then also at the bottom there, you see the survey that I've asked you to take, and that will come up on your screen as well. But really, thank you all so much for being here. Dr. Lutz, thank you for having us. Kara and Lewis, as always, you're amazing. I appreciate it, everything all of you did. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you so much.
Have a great holiday, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.